Hi, this is Greg Ellers. I'm back with Andy Lee's a good friend, author of the book Corruption of Government and partner in macro strategies in London, renowned economist. Andy, it's great to have you on the show today. I think our viewers today have gotten a little bit more of an education than they've probably gotten in a lot of different ways over the last few years. And it's important to really highlight that because misallocation of capital, corruption of government are synonymous in the sense that we're not doing the best and we're not being a fiduciary in leadership of a government misallocating the tax dollars. If the tax dollars are too high, people are even having a reduction in not only in GDP, but their standard of living, which is something that we've definitely seen over the last 20 years relative to potential. So as we went through the last segment, we started to really talk about what is the misallocation of capital. And what in this segment, we really want our viewers to understand what's that going to look like when it's likely we see an uptick and disruption in unemployment, or people feel that there's a lost opportunity that they had. But you and I look at this differently, don't we, Andy? We say, that's great. We need more people in the private sector. People need to think outside of civil service or civic duty to think about your civic duty is to work in the private sector, isn't it, Andy? Become more productive, become a participant in GDP growing versus being on the side of misallocated capital.
Well, the idea of a life of service, which is what the people within the government and the public sector say. Again, if we go back to what we started with, rather than serving people, it is actually destroying capital and therefore is totally against people. It is a life of disservice at every level. But we can bring this misallocation of capital. It also applies to the private sector because they have to work within the constraints of government, all the rules, regulations, etc. And those corruptions have meant we've got record monopoly profits, which is coming from the tech sector. These huge, great margins are because we haven't got capital allocated properly. So in a proper system, the allocation of capital is in accordance with the work that the factors of production do. Well, in the tech sector, those 50% margins are obviously in response to, it's not for labor, it's not for capital, it's for risk capital, but they're not losing money. So that's clearly a monopoly profit. That's gone to about 25% of corporate profits, or of revenues rather, global in the US. That means that labor is not getting their share, as you say. They've basically been starved. So if government starts reversing this, if government starts to work properly, we will start to see some good middle class type jobs created in the private sector. Again, if we go back to that idea of a trophic pyramid, think of what that means. It's jobs at every level where everyone's competing to make something productive. Instead, we've been hollowing that out. If we're going back to sorting this out, we need to replace those. We need to create competition, and we need to basically create middle management, etc. We need to give people savings from that. So at the moment, through that destruction of capital, it means there's not the capital in those places, and therefore not the savings or the knowledge in those places. That's all got to come back. So you've got to think about smaller companies starting to form and basically start to compete. All these smaller middle-class, medium-sized companies, that's what's all been sacrificed for years after year after year. Stripping out that to support a few big companies, that's all going to change. So I would say, first of all, you've got to look outside of government because, it's pretty obvious that government spending is complete waste. If we're going to a productive system, you've got to look at those new jobs, creating those new jobs. And that will also mean much more in the way of community, etc., because it's going to be localized industries, etc. So I think this is all, very, very positive in the medium term.
What you really said there, and I hope our viewers picked up on it, because we always hear regulation, new laws, be it executive order or be it from specific agencies or from the government. As those are repealed or just rewritten so they don't exist in the same form, that gives businesses the ability to form, capital formation. The opportunity exists because the barriers to entry or that are the benefit to these large multinational, in many cases, technology companies, they start to break down and other people have opportunities that didn't currently exist. So our viewers, as they think about opportunity in the coming years and decades, if you're willing to accept the fact that the sustainability of this misallocation of capital has ended, the question becomes, how much does it actually change, and how is it felt, and what those opportunities are? If we take it to the point that those opportunities are not only going to exist, Andy, but there's going to be many of them, it comes down to people realizing, yes, those big tech companies that exist are going to continue to exist, but their ability to be a monopoly is going to dissipate. And that's going to give me in the private sector the opportunity potentially to start a business or to become part of a
what we're doing at this moment, Greg. This is a business, effectively, isn't it? I've got my own little business. Used to work at a big institutional bank. You similarly. We've basically using the resources available to us, the modern technology, and we're now competing with the majors. That's what's going to happen. More and more of this kind of thing. Not media, but in business generally.
No, absolutely. So when we think about how do people identify some of these things, Andy, we've got 400 million people in America, so there's no way to put everybody and paint everybody with a broad brush. But when we start thinking about these changes and opportunities, spend a few minutes, if you can, talking about what opportunities you see in the near term as the government becomes more efficient and they allocate less capital incorrectly, and our GDP or our U.S. economy is not measured by how much the government's spending, which at some point, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, it was in the mid-20s as a percentage of GDP, and that starts to come back down. Ideally, we'd like it very low, but let's just say, we see a 10 or 12% drop in that. Where are those opportunities for people? Where should they be looking initially to see these opportunities? Because technology in and of itself is grand, but we also know that there's a lot more operational capital required for that. But a lot of people out there and our viewers, that's not where they lie. They lie in an opportunity to start a business and to not do so with a heavy level of investment.
I understand that they don't have the heavy level of investment, but I think, you're asking the sort of $64 million question, aren't you? But what you've got to do...
But you're worth 64 million, Andy, so I've got to ask you the question.
I think what you've got to consider again is values. What is a real value? When we talked before this, you said to me you wanted to look at career satisfaction. What is career satisfaction? And I thought, wow, well, that's a strange question. But then to me, what it is it's about doing something real, something that really creates utility to pay for itself. And thereby, through doing that, you're realizing your own real value. I think that's what you've got to do. You've got to think for yourself, what is it that someone might want? What you can do, what service you can offer someone, sort of thing. And I think from that's where you're going to get value. And again, whilst you say there's not the huge capital available to do big things, which I totally agree, don't forget the price of technology is so cheap now that a lot of things can be done. I don't think, to compete with some of these bigger companies is not going to take a huge amount of capital. It's just the right ideas. And that comes from people. I mean, again, this is where we've gone so badly wrong. Through stripping out capital, we've stripped out knowledge, information, intangible capital, and the ability to compete and thereby generate ideas, price discovery. We've got to go back to price discovery. And I can't do it for other people, but the point is you've got to find what you think is valuable. And the only way to realize whether something's valuable is to offer it out to the market. And what you'll find is the market says, yes, I love that, or no, I think that's dreadful. But that's where people find value. It's not what they think is good. I mean, this is, again, part of the sort of problem. We're told that right-wing politics is ugly. It's, looking after yourself, no one else. Truth is, you only make money by selling something that someone else wants, that someone can make utility out of. So it's only by creating utility for someone else that you can make money. That's all. So you've got to basically try and find something where there is interest. But I think what's going to really happen is going to be where we've got industry at the moment. Most of that industry will remain, but you're going to start seeing smaller competitors growing within that.
That makes sense.
Whether it's cars, getting smaller, some specialist companies and what have you, anything, I think you'll find at a small level, people will start to, compete, and there will be demand for that competition. And it's through that competition where the greatness will come from.
Absolutely. And so with that, we're going to step away for our sponsors and come back and close out this great show with my friend Andy Lees, the author of Corruption of Government, best-selling author, and talk about career satisfaction, including Andy's himself in the next segment. With that, we'll be back shortly. Thank you.
Break past limitations and rethink success. Are you ready to push the boundaries of what's possible?